We have Charlotte dialing in from Laguna. And okay, we are also being live streamed on YouTube. So if ever you get internet problems, you can also watch us on YouTube, and our M&D associate Kelly will also share with us the link in the chat box. So we also have Jebert from Northeastern Mindanao State University. So we also have representatives calling in from Cavite. Hello, Christine. We also have participants from DSWD Field Office 6. Hello, Oscar. Okay. Okay, so again, call your other office mates, your friends, your classmates to ask them to dial in because we will be starting in a few minutes. And this afternoon, we are going to discuss something about the multi-generational workplace. So this is one of the most requested topics in our evaluations, which come from you guys. So I hope that you will really get something out from this afternoon session. So Pauline is also here. Hi! A magical afternoon to you too. We have Catherine from PUP Manila. So we have a good mix. Grabe, national talaga ha. Meron from Region 6, meron from Region 10. Ayan. Okay, so I think we can start. So again, good afternoon to everyone. So this afternoon, we are going to discuss again, bridging the generational gap, engagement strategies for a multi-generational workforce. And let me introduce myself. I'm Gabby. For those of you who know and don't know me, you can call me Gabby. I'm the Learning and Development Associate of Positive Workplaces. And I will be facilitating this afternoon's webinar. So again, I want to introduce to you our company. We are Positive Workplaces, and we co-create cultures that enhance the well-being of the Filipino workforce. And how do we do that? So we at Positive Workplaces, we believe that positive cultures are made through positivity ripples. And it all starts with leading the self. So diba, pag uma-attend tayo ng mga ganitong webinars, we read books, we research on what we can do to improve our well-being or to improve our leadership or management strategies and skills. That's where it all starts. And once we are able to apply what we learn, that's how we lead others, diba? And once we lead others, we are able to also lead cultures. Okay? We influence others, and collectively as a group, we lead cultures, and that's how we ultimately build positive workplaces. So again, this afternoon or for the month of May, we are discussing the key to XYZ, unlocking the secrets leading to the multi-generational team. Kasi diba, nabasa namin while we were researching on this topic, nakita namin na this is the first time in history that actually 5 generations are in the workplace. So we all know that each generation brings with them different skills, different outlooks in life. And how do we manage those differences para mas maging we can hone them, we can use them to our advantage instead of it creating problems. And that's what we are going to talk about this May. So as you can see, our lineup this May is first this webinar, and the next on Friday, I'm sorry, nasasanay akong weekly tayong nagkikita. And then on Friday, it will be me and Alma discussing keeping up with the trend, leading millennials and Gen Zs. And then Nikki will be with us on May 31, on Tuesday next week. And she will be discussing Let's Get Digital, because we all know that digital tools are in and we must learn how to embrace them so that we can really facilitate that multi-generational workforce. So I don't want to keep you for long. So here are just some reminders. We hope that you have another device or another tab ready so that you can go to our Mentimeter links. And then if you have a pen and paper or any note-taking device with you so that you can take notes during the session. And of course, we highly encourage engagement with the audience, but please be respectful in our chat box. And also, I know that a lot of you need the certificate, not only as an evidence that you attended the webinar, but of course, diba, you also put in time for this self-development activity. So when you answer the evaluation form at the end of this webinar, you will be able to get your e-certificate and it will be open for 30 minutes only. Again, we'd like to remind you to make sure that you write your full name and your address, the correct one, because it will automatically be sent to you once you answer the evaluation form. And if you haven't received a certificate right after filling up the form, kindly wait 2 days before following up. Then nakikita natin we're around 200 to 300 this afternoon, diba? So just be patient because we are going to get back to you if there will be any delays. Okay, so let's keep the ball rolling, and I want to introduce to you our resource speaker this afternoon. She's been with us before and we're happy to have her again this May. So our resource speaker has designed and implemented learning, leadership, and team development programs for over 130,000 employees worldwide. She was based in the USA, working in one of the top tech companies in the world until 2018. She then decided to come back home to continuously refine her purpose in the Philippines. She is currently managing her own firm, Elijah Corpus Consulting, where they focus on partnering with organizations toward culture transformation, building capability of individuals, teams, and leaders, and creating opportunities for empowerment towards making a positive impact on society. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's all give a virtual round of applause to Miss Elijah Corpus. Hi, Elijah.
Thank you, Gabby. And hello, everyone. Good afternoon. It's so nice to see all of you here. I've partnered with Positive Workplaces before. Just last week, we had Nikki, actually, Gabby, if you didn't know. Yeah, si Nikki naman nag-guest sa amin last week. So now I'm really happy to be here and working with Positive Workplaces again. So hello, everyone. And for this afternoon, like what Gabby has introduced, we are going to talk about bridging the generational gap. And really what it boils down to is we want to look into engagement strategies so we can navigate the multi-generational workplace that we currently are facing. Before we dig into all of that, I'll quickly introduce myself and our firm. My firm, Elijah Corpus Consulting, we focus on impact. And so we make sure that culture transformation of a team and an organization, it leads to impact that is felt by organizations and impact that ripples into society. Very much aligned with Positive Workplaces, as you can tell. That's why we love working with companies that have very similar values to what we have. Like what Gabby mentioned, you can call me Elijah. And my career in this field really started when I was abroad. Right after college here in UP Diliman, I went to Michigan State University and took my master's in human resources and labor relations. While I was there, I got recruited by Microsoft. And so right after graduation, I moved to Seattle, Washington, and worked with Microsoft's Global Learning and Development team. Nung nasa Microsoft ako, I think that really was one of my first experiences of a multi-generational workforce. When I was there, I was always the youngest. In my team, in the development program I was in, I was pretty much the most inexperienced, the one with no prior work that she has been to. And so I had to learn a lot from the people who were in the older generations. But I think beyond that, I also got to learn to stand on my own 2 feet. And everyone around me, they never made me feel like I was smaller, or I wasn't as good as they are just because I was younger. Yun yung sana matutunan natin ngayon, na whether you are one of the older ones in your organization or one of the younger ones in your team, lahat tayo may mako-contribute. And if we are able to harness all of these differences, that just makes our teams and our organizations even better. Let us jump right in. So here's what I hope we can do to sort of get us in the spirit of talking about generations. In the chat, go ahead and type your generation. Do it in this format. Go with name, generation, and age. Okay? Kung comfortable kayo, but I hope you can be comfortable doing this together since we are talking about generations anyway. For me, for example, I'm Elijah. I'm from Generation Y, or more commonly known as Millennials, and I am 29 years old. Quezon City, Philippines. No, just kidding. Okay, let's see. Where are my chats? There we go. I see a lot of people are from Gen Y, like me, Gen Z as well. Lots of Gen Zs today. Good to see that you're all seeking out learning as early as now. And then I think I did see some Gen X's in there. All right. Thank you all so much for being so open in sharing what generation you are from and what age you are in. Minsan nakakahiya mag-share ng age, right? But another thing that I hope we can get out of today is to be proud of the generations that we are in. Kasi lahat tayo, no matter what age, no matter what generation, we have something to bring to the table. So own it if you're a boomer, a Gen X, a traditionalist, a Gen Y, or a Gen Z. And so today, what we are going to talk about is, number one, let's look at some relevant trends that we are seeing in terms of the diversity in generations at work. Number two, we are also going to look at the positive outcomes that we can expect if we can engage these multiple generations of employees in our workplaces. And of course, we are not going to leave today without talking about strategies. Kailangan meron kayong mabaon na mga actions that you can do in your own teams or in your own organizations. Let's dig right into it and go into the first objective, which is looking at some of the relevant trends that might be interesting for all of you. Get your phones or open up a separate browser because we are going to answer some questions on Mentimeter. How well do you know the generations? Go to www.menti.com and use the code 7938031, or you can directly click on the link that Gabby just posted there in the chat. So thank you so much, Gabby. And go ahead, everyone. Answer the first question. Who is or are, pwede dalawang sagot, more likely to choose an online training over an in-person training? Is it the Gen X's, the Gen Y or the Millennials, or the Gen Z? So go ahead and pick your answer. Don't worry, anonymous naman siya, and we're just doing this as a quick check. So whatever your answer is, we'll see later kung ano yung tamang sagot. 85, we are at 308, so hintay tayo ng konti. Siguro mga 100 plus until we get to the next question. So go ahead, click on the link that Gabby just shared in the chat, or if you're watching on YouTube, you can type menti.com and use the code that you're seeing there on your screen. All right, so far, tandaan nyo yung sagot nyo sa Mentimeter, ha? Because it looks like, for the most part, you all are saying that it's the Gen Zs who are more likely to choose an online training over an in-person training. Okay, next question tayo. Next question is, who is more likely to identify or self-identify as a member of the LGBTQIA+ community? Is it your millennials or your Gen Zs? So keep on putting your answers in. and choose one lang for this question. So again, who is more likely to self-identify as LGBTQIA+? Okay, we are at 123, good enough. And again, it looks like it's the Gen Zs, yung majority of the answers. Last question, everyone. Last question is, true or false? Gen Zs prioritize financial security over personal fulfillment. True or false? Okay, keep on putting your answers in. All right, so far, 62% are saying false. Pero medyo malaki rin yung true, 36%. Medyo half and half tayo for this one. All right. Sige, are you all ready to see the correct answers? Give me a thumbs up if you want to see the correct answer. Do your thumbs up reactions. Okay, so let's jump right back into our PowerPoint and let's see what the correct answers are. First question was, who is or are more likely to choose an online training over an in-person training? And drum roll, the answer is, you might be surprised kasi iba yung sagot niyo sa Mentimeter kanina. Actually, there's this research that says 25% of Gen Xers would rather do an online training over in-person training compared to just 13% of Gen Zs. Interesting, diba? We would think that the Gen Zs or the millennials who are better, quote-unquote, better at using digital tools, we would think na sila yung mas may gusto ng online training. But actually, according to this research, which was a survey of 18,000 professionals across 19 countries, and this is something that appeared in Harvard Business Review. According to this research, actually, Gen X, sila pa yung may mas gusto ng online. If you think about it, it kind of makes sense, right? Your Gen Xers are middle-aged. Maybe they have more responsibilities at home, more errands that they need to do in their personal lives. And so having an online training is something that can allow them to still get learning while getting their responsibilities done. Ang sabi dito sa research na to, Gen Zs crave for in-person training because they want that connection. They want to feel the human-to-human conversations and how that goes. So as we can see, kailangan yung assumptions natin, minsan kini-question natin, di ba? Because iba yung sinabi natin sa Mentimeter. Next question. The next question was, who is more likely to self-identify as LGBTQIA+? And for this one, you all got it right. What the research says is the Gen Zs are more likely to self-identify as a part of the LGBTQIA+ community. According to a Gallup research where they looked at 2021 data, roughly 21% of Gen Z Americans identify as LGBT. If you compare the generations, nearly 1 in 6 Gen Z adults would say they are bisexual, whereas only 6% of millennials would say that, and less than 2% of Gen X would say that. If we compare that to 15% of Gen Z adults who say they are bisexual, malaki yung difference, diba? That's more than half of people who would say that they are part of that community. So as we can see, if we look at the trends, it seems like the Gen Zs are very much comfortable with talking about their sexual identity and very open about that. I am in this theater class that I go to every day this month of May. And in my theater class, the range of ages is very diverse. We have people as young as 16 years old and people who are as a little young as 57 years old. So 16 to 57 yung age ng classmates ko. The 16-year-olds, like yung mga young adults, they're so open and so cool about their sexuality. Like, minsan kahit chat lang may magsasabi, oh, ate, you know, I'm bi, ate, but more of 80% I like boys and 20% I like girls. So ganun sila magsalita. And I look back to when I was 16 and looking at my peers, parang hindi ganun ka-open yung mga peers ko. Even the ones who were out and proud of their sexual identity, they weren't that open in talking about it publicly. So as we can see, the trend is really shifting, especially when it comes to gender. Last question. So let's see here. True or false? Gen Zs prioritize financial security over personal fulfillment. A lot of people said earlier false, and I'm sorry to say, everyone, but you're all wrong because the answer is true. So ang Gen Zs daw, they resemble their parents' generation when it comes to pragmatism and practicality. What this says is, for example, if you look at the percentage of fresh grads who want to work for large companies, we see that it's increasing from only 14% in 2016, now it's 19% in 2017. That's a clue na sinasabi na yung mga mas batang generation, parang gusto nila yung stability and security that is brought about by your large multinationals. They're more willing and they're looking for that stability. It's funny, right? Because, di ba yung sabi natin sa Filipino, lumalaki tayong katulad ng mga magulang natin. So, parang ganun yung mga Gen Zs. They're being kind of like their parents who are Gen Xers. Crazy, right? That we have all of these assumptions about the generations. Some of them turn out to be true, and some of them, it turns out, might just be stereotypes that we've been led to believe. And so, what does that tell us? That tells us that we are different, that's true, but we are not worlds apart. Merong similarities that we can find if we try to find those similarities. There's this study that was done by IBM's Institute for Business Value. What this visual says in front of you is it looks at what are the elements that will engage employees at work. And then they compared across millennials, Gen X's, and boomers. As we can see here, parang medyo aligned siya, di ba? In terms of what people are looking for to be engaged at work, they are looking at pretty much the same things. And so again, it tells us that we are not that different after all. Even if, let's say, for example, millennials are kind of stereotyped to want purpose, that doesn't mean the boomers do not want purpose as well. If we think about it, a lot of us are also influenced by and have influenced by our experiences. There's this research by Tammy Erickson, and what she looks into is generations and the shared formative events that happen and shape our lives. If we look at this, for the traditionalists, for example, who were born from 1928 to 45, of course, World War II was there. The Great Depression was something that gave people an idea of how hard life can be. And so these traditionalists, they know that the world can be very uncertain, very vulnerable, and having respect for authority is important because that's the world they lived in. It was kind of militaristic at times, especially with the war going on. For your boomers who were born 1946 to 1964, we see that they grappled with the after effects of World War II. And this is where globally things become very, very different. For some countries, especially like America or some Western countries, we saw a boom after the World War. Actually, yumaman sila after the World War. And medyo maganda yung buhay. Kaya lumaki yung population, and boomers are actually one of the biggest populations in terms of generation. In other parts of the world, though, especially in developing countries, mahirap yung buhay after World War because people were rebuilding, literally rebuilding their countries from the ground up. Another thing that we see the boomers experienced are ongoing wars. Nagkaroon pa rin ng, di ba, many wars all around the world, people fighting for their freedom. And the interesting thing about your boomers is they actually were very, very active in pushing for different civil rights. 1946 to 64, we saw a lot of changes in terms of what women can do, for example, or what African Americans are able to do. So maraming nangyari dyan to push for civil rights. For your Gen X's, 1965 to 80, still economic hardships that was present. There's a lot of uncertainty. Cold War was happening. Cold War was, remember, Cold War, they weren't actually bombing cities or nations, but the world was always kind of seeing, oh no, is this the thing that will make people bomb each other? So medyo uncertain kasi hindi mo alam kung anong mangyayari sunod. Another interesting thing about 1965 to 1980 was we saw a lot of changing cultural norms. I don't know yung mga buhay na nung 80s, di ba? Yan yung mga disco. Women had relatively more freedom compared to the past generations. It was the hippie movement where people kind of dressed however way they wanted. So yeah, tama si Alan sa chat. Naging independent yung mga Gen X dahil nga ang daming different cultural norms that changed in the world, and you felt like you could be your own self. You could show your personality. Let's go to the Gen Ys or the millennials. For your millennials who were born 1981 to 1996, we actually saw the rise of technology. We were kind of in between when we were younger. When I was younger, no phones, right? No computers. And then suddenly you get into grade school, high school, and you realize, dapat pala ganda may cellphone. Okay pala yung internet. Okay pala yung laptop. And so we kind of are in that in-between phase. It was also the rise of the startup scene where you saw these people who got really, really rich because of the companies that they founded. And that's something that affected the Gen Y's entrepreneurial spirit. The thing about the Gen Y generation, though, is we were teens or young adults during the financial crisis of 2008. And so yung mga young adults, baka nahirapan maghanap ng trabaho kasi nga bagsak yung markets. Nakita nyo kung gaano kahirap to make your own business and start it up because really, financially, the whole world was going through something. In that time span, also, these people were already conscious and can kind of understand what was happening when 9/11 happened. Even though 9/11 is something that happened in America, we all know that it had effects worldwide. Sa ibang parts of the world, nandun pa rin yung violence that we saw started up because of the events of 9/11. So all of that is affecting your millennials until today. And then your Gen Zs who were born 97 to 2015, these are your digital natives. They were babies when they learned how to use an iPad. They are not uncomfortable with it because they know what buttons to press, it seems like. Also, they were probably really, really young during the financial crisis and nakita nila kung paano nag-struggle yung mga magulang nila and yung mga older siblings nila. That's one of the hypotheses kung bakit daw siguro pragmatic at practical yung Gen Zs. Because they saw that their ates and kuyas struggled finding work, struggled finding a stable salary, a stable job. So siguro sinabi daw nila sa sarili nila, that's not my path. I do not want that uncertainty. And then of course, as we can see, cultural norms are still changing. Trends are going by so fast these days. Who can even keep up if skinny jeans are still on trend or not, diba? Parang ang dami nagbabago all the time. And of course, COVID-19 is something that ngayon pa lang, a lot of researchers are already saying that's going to do a number on your Gen Zs and will affect their lives greatly in the future. That's a lot of history, right? But what you have to remember is we all influence and are influenced by our experiences. Lahat tayo dumadaan sa violent wars happening in the world. Lahat tayo dumadaan sa financial crisis. Nag-iiba-iba lang yung levels and yung mukha ng mga pinagdadaanan natin. And so at the core of it, it seems like everyone wants the same thing. We want a good income. We want purpose. We want to leave a legacy in the world. But the nuances is what will make them slightly different in terms of generations. Again, the lesson here is we are different, but we are not worlds apart. It just feels that way sometimes kapag hindi tayo nag-agree right off the bat. But if we really try, there are more similarities than we may think. And so let's get into the second part, which is now, what are the positive outcomes that we can expect when we engage these multiple generations in the workplace? Quick question for all of you. Eto na. This is the one time in this whole workshop where I will allow you to rant. So let me know in the chat. What complaints do you usually hear about your generation? So sa chat, isulat nyo what your generation is and then the complaint about it. I'm a millennial and usually people say we are entitled, we complain too much, and we are actually lazy. Kasi salita ng salita pero wala naman daw gawa. So yun yung complaints nila about millennials. Okay? Yes, idealistic daw tayo, Mia, di ba? Okay, Gen Zs rely too much on gadgets. True. Gen Ys are snowflakes. Gen Zs, yeah, masyado daw woke yung mga Gen Z, di ba? Gen X. Gen X, hinahayaan lang, okay? What else? Are there other complaints that you would hear? Lalo na kapag yung older generations, pinapagsabihan ka, di ba? Doon lumalabas yung mga kabataan talaga ngayon. Tapos nag-iiba-iba na yung paningin natin sa generations. Gen X's daw are always correct, or they think they're always correct. All right. So we cannot deny that there are so many stereotypes out there. But what we can do, especially when we are in the workplace, is we can think about how might we use these usual stereotypes as sources of strength for our organizations. Let's look at it per generation. Yung traditionalists daw, they cannot deal with change. They just do what they are told. Maybe they just bow to authority and don't question. Your traditionalists, remember, they grew up during the war. So kailangan talaga you do what you're told. Because sometimes if a soldier tells you to run, you gotta run or you die, right? And so natutunan nila na kailangan I bow to authority and I follow. Sometimes we see that as inflexible or people who don't question things. But now we have to ask ourselves, what might we be able to do so we can harness their strengths in organizations? If you think about it, your traditionalists are, hindi na sila nasa workplace for the most part. They're past retiring age. But there's still a lot of wisdom that these people can share. And so what we can do is to find a way to use that wisdom that they've had through their years of experience. They like authority, and so let's ask them, what made you follow people before? Like, what was the context like? How might we understand your world better so we can learn from that? Get history lessons. Lalo na if your company was started a long time ago, nung buhay pa sila. It's so great to hear stories of when your company was still small and starting up as a corporation. Your traditionalists will know that history. Use them so you can remember the lessons that we need to learn from our very, very long history. So again, hindi naman sa ayaw nila ng change, hindi naman sa yes man lang sila and nagpo-follow lang sila sa lahat. Yun yung naging buhay nila because of the circumstances they were in. So to use that as a strength, let's understand what those circumstances are. And while they are still alive, sila yung best people to give you the first-hand stories of what was happening in their world during that time. Next, let's go to your boomers. I don't know if may boomers dito, parang konti lang kasi mostly Gen X, Millennial, and Gen Z tayo today. And so just in case there are boomers there, let me know if this stereotype is something you hear. Ang boomers daw, they cannot use technology. I don't know if you remember, but di ba a few years ago, yung okay boomer, like that phrase became really, really popular. And then there was also this joke na yung mga boomers daw kung makautos, ang daming utos, pero yung PDF, hindi naman nila alam paano gamitin, di ba? So, yun daw yung mga stereotype about boomers. And then another stereotype is they only care about stability, about their own families or their own selves. Sometimes they are called the me generation because there's this idea that they like to make themselves successful and minsan sarili lang nila yung iniisip nila. It's interesting because if you look at history, a lot of boomers were actually part of the big movements that we have seen in the world. And so how can we harness the strengths of your boomers? Use your boomers so you can generate energy and focus around high performance in the organization. Ang sabi nila, your boomers daw, because they are self-made, they kind of had to find a way to be successful in the world. That means they are also usually more highly productive and they value productivity. And so, yes, exactly. I love the word Alan in the chat used. They're survivors. And what you want to do with survivors is use their street smarts to help your company. They must have the energy and the focus it takes to succeed. Use them for that. Your boomers, some of them are almost retiring or leaving the companies. So bago sila umalis, pick their brains. Ask them, what do you think should we do so we can get to our vision? Or maybe you could even ask them, what behaviors do we need to adjust so we can refocus on high performance? Most of the time, they would be able to give you very insightful answers on that. Next up, your Gen Xs. Yung Gen Xs daw, sila yung forgotten middle child. Bakit? Because if you look at boomers, ang dami-dami-dami ng boomers. Millennials are also madami. But your Generation X, they're not as plenty population-wise. Also, what happened with your Gen Xs is when they entered organizations, medyo na-stuck sila sa middle management because your boomers are retiring later in life and continuing to work until sometimes past retirement. And so na-stuck yung Gen X sa middle management kasi hindi sila ma-promote higher dahil nandun pa yung boomers. And so sometimes your Gen Xs are forgotten or they're being told, oh, because you're not assertive enough, or maybe I don't see you as a top leader because you don't have those skills. So yun daw minsan yung stereotype. Now, if we can harness the strength of your Gen Xs, we can use them to build connections between generations. They're already the middle child. And so use that middle child position wisely. Your Gen Xs, they probably have boomer parents or traditionalist parents, and they probably have millennial or Gen Z kids. They're already in the middle. They must know how to play that middle ground, and they can help you out in your organization. Your Gen Ys or your millennials, eto na, kami daw ay impatient. We change jobs too much, konting reklamo lang, magre-resign, papalit trabaho. We are entitled, very idealistic. We think about what should happen and we're not grounded on reality. What you can do is to harness that strength. Instead of labeling millennials as masyadong mareklamo, ask them, bakit ka nagre-reklamo? Tungkol saan ba yung reklamo mo? What are you observing in your world that's leading you to speak up? Thank you for being brave enough to share that. And so use that energy to make change happen and improve systems and cultures along the way. It's funny because if you think about it, a lot of millennials clash with boomers, but in terms of civil rights activity, in terms of pushing for human rights and being active in social impact, very similar yung millennials dun sa boomers nung bata-bata pa sila. So, di ba? Minsan ka-clash mo talaga yung kapareho mo. And then last is your Gen Zs. Your Gen Zs daw, they break down easily. They are too spoiled, masyadong na baby growing up. That's why they can't handle problems. And also, they're very addicted to their phones. So what can we do to harness that strength? What you can do is to use them to create a workplace that is open to vulnerable conversations. Instead of seeing it as, puro mental health naman tong mga batang to, think about it. This is your chance to improve your organization's stance on well-being. If you're able to engage the Gen Zs on topics like mental health, emotional health, physical well-being, it's something that can help you out with all of your other generations who also need support in terms of mental health, physical health, and general well-being. So again, maybe sila yung catalyst to have these kinds of vulnerable conversations in our workplace. If we think about it, kahit na maraming differences, what we want is to create synergy in that diversity. If we are able to look at the positive ways we can use these stereotypes, we can create synergies in our organizations. Synergy happens when we realize that the combination, like the whole, is so much greater than the separate parts. And so imagine natin, kung yung 5 generations natin in the workplace are able to work together, that amounts to something so much greater than if you're just using one generation. And that is the second lesson we need to remember. Now we get into the third, which is the strategies that we can use to create a work environment where different generations can thrive. Quick question in the chat. So think about first-time parents. What do you think are the support that first-time parents would need from their teams or their organization? So type in the chat one word or one phrase. Ano yung kailangan nila na suporta dun sa mga bagong parent, whether it's a mom or a father? Okay, financial support, understanding, financial, extra leaves, very important. Medical benefits as well. Yes, great. Yeah, moral support. Oo nga naman siguro, no? Kailangan nila ng cheerleaders. Flexible time, maternity and paternity leaves. Open for talks and discussions. Great. Now, question for all of you. Who do you think are the first-time parents? So sino ang first-time parents na tinutukoy natin sa question na to? Who is that visual that comes into mind for you when we say a first-time parent? Let's see. Type in the chat. Millennials? Yeah, okay. Yes, so the thing is, a first-time parent can actually be anyone from any generation. In the world right now, for example, iba-iba yung age of a usual average age of a first-time mother. In developing countries, like in the Philippines, for example, the average age of a first-time mom is 23.1. I don't know what the point is, but yun daw yung average age of a first-time mom. For people who are more educated, the average age is 30s, early 30s. But anyone can be a first-time parent regardless of age. Think about someone in their 40s or late 30s with late stage pregnancies. Or think about someone who adopts a new baby or people who go through surrogacy, for example. And so, pag-iisipin natin, kahit sino, kahit anong generation, pwede maging first-time parent. And so the first strategy here is to think in terms of life stages. Instead of being way too focused on just generational differences, it pays off if we think about the life stages that a person goes through. We have to acknowledge that priorities will change depending on the situation. Think about it, right? I'm a millennial. I know older millennials who are married and starting to have babies. But that life stage is not where I'm at. That's very, very different from what I want. Like right now at my life stage, what I want is personal development, career progression, and also just being able to have fun with my friends and family and doing the things I'm passionate about. Kaya nga nagti-theater class every night, di ba? Kasi wala namang responsibilities that I need to take care of. And I am so happy about that. And so what we can see here is even within generations, people can be so different depending on what they are experiencing in their lives. And we have to acknowledge that. Another thing we can do to acknowledge that life stages is important is we have to set up listening systems so we know what our employees need and want. What are listening systems? Listening systems, for example, are annual surveys where you think about the culture, the climate of the company. These can be interviews, focus group discussions as well. Make sure that you're doing these discussions so you have a pulse on what your employees are going through, especially in terms of the stage of life that they are in. Another thing you can do is to create easily available resources that will help with specific life stages. For example, if you think about a parent who is gone on leave, medyo matagal din yun, di ba? Pag umaalis sila for parental leave. When they come back, something I worked on before is what we would call inboarding. Onboarding pag new hire, di ba? So ito, inboarding is what we would use so we can help those people who have been gone on paternity or maternity leave. So when they come back to the company, hindi nila mafe-feel na nabibigla sila with all of the changes that have happened since they were gone. You could also think about having employee resource groups. These are like mini organizations or mini clubs that will support depending on the life stage. You can have an ERG, an employee resource group for new parents, for example, or you can have an ERG for working students, people who are taking masters or PhD while working. So pwede kayong gumawa ng support groups na ganun for different life stages. Another strategy is to offer support and benefits widely. Let people self-select. What do we mean by this? Sometimes, when we go too much with the stereotype for that generation, we might be tempted to just offer certain perks to that generation. For example, if you look at the older age of corporations, uso dati yung mga executive perks, di ba? Ask the boomers that you know, ang standard before of you've made it in a company is they give you some shares in different exclusive country clubs na pwede mong gamitin for meetings, di ba? Or kotse, may pa-kotse, tapos pwede ka pumili ng magandang kotse, yung top level. Nawawala na yon these days kasi hindi na siya masyadong sikat as a perk. But if you ask your millennials, I'm sure millennials would want a car as well, right? And so sometimes when we just go at stereotypes per generation, nawawala yung essence of the individual. And so what you can do is encourage different kinds of practices, for example, that promote well-being. Instead of just having leaves as a way to promote well-being, have a variety of options. Maybe you can have daycare services or discounted daycare options for people who already have children. Maybe you can have extended vacation leaves that people can apply to have. So mix it up and let people select what applies to their own lives. Next is to provide a diverse range of learning and development options for all employees. There's this book that looked into what millennial managers need to be aware of. And dun sa book na yun, ang warning nila ay millennials do not stereotype that boomers do not like to learn. Because they did a survey and actually boomers are very active learners. They may not quickly grasp the new technology in the world, but they want to. And so we have to find a way to provide a diverse range of options so people can go after the learning that they want. And then the third thing you can think about is to provide opportunities for meaning and purpose to be realized. The stereotypical individual who wants purpose is your millennial, di ba? Yun yung lagi nating naririnig in popular articles out there. But think about it. For someone who is retiring and leaving the company, wouldn't they want a legacy? I work with a lot of senior leaders who are boomer age, and a lot of them say that they want to do this big project because they want to leave their company better than when they entered. That's such a nice thing to think about, right? And so, how can we provide opportunities for everyone, regardless of generations, to be able to realize their purpose and meaning while at work? Maybe these are volunteer opportunities. Maybe it's about opening people up to be able to do side projects while they are working for your company. Again, it's better if you offer support and benefits widely and just let people self-select. And in the chat, the term that this is called, yes, thank you, Ace Camille. So in case anyone is curious, the term that we usually call it is, it's a cafeteria method. So imagine nyo sa cafeteria, di ba? Parang may iba-ibang dishes, tapos bahala ka pumili ko anong gusto mo na dish na kakainin. So kaya siya cafeteria method because you're self-selecting what benefit or perk you'd like to enjoy for your own life. And then the third is, please talk to the individual. Set up regular one-on-ones. If you are a leader or a manager right now, make sure you know your people. Make sure that you have one-on-ones with them. The recommendation is at least twice a month or once every 2 weeks. Go beyond the projects. Ask them, what are you doing right now? How are you feeling? What are you thinking? What are your thoughts on your development? If you are an individual contributor right now, maybe it's good to start asking your manager or your team leader, your supervisor, kung pwedeng mag-schedule na kayo ng regular one-on-ones if you don't have it already. Another thing you can do is to enable teams so they can talk about each other's strengths. Help teams so they can have those conversations. Maybe you can give guide questions, or you can try to facilitate these mini team buildings or many team development opportunities para nakakapag-usap sila. It's very important that teammates understand the differences of each other para magamit din nila yung differences na yon as a way to find synergy through the diversity. So again, team support is very important. And then last is reinforce the importance of diversity and inclusion for every single employee. As we can see, nowadays, people are more comfortable or getting more and more comfortable with expressing themselves, expressing not just their sexual identity, but even in something as simple as about what to wear, what you prefer in terms of music or movies and TV. So gusto natin ma-encourage yung individuality na yon. And we can do that by reinforcing that diversity and inclusion is important in the company, and we commit to making that happen. These are just some strategies that you can think of, but to summarize, we want to think person first. Yes, it's good to use the multi-generational research as added knowledge. But at the end of the day, we cannot just go with those stereotypes. Mas importante pa rin talaga if we look at every single individual and what strengths they are bringing to our teams and our organizations. That is it in terms of strategies. And let's go ahead review what we've been talking about this afternoon. For today, we said that we want to find out how we can bridge the generational gap. We want to go beyond simply using generational stereotypes as we judge our colleagues and our leaders. That knowledge is important. Magbasa kayo ng research about generations. It's always interesting, especially the ones about history. But we have to go beyond just stereotypical judgments. What we want is to get to a place where we are using strengths of each generation to create a higher performing and a more resilient organization. We said today that we can bridge that gap by, number one, really trying to find the similarities. We affirmed that, yes, we are different, but we are not worlds apart. So, posible na makakita ng similarities. Lahat tayo may napagdaanang violence in the world, instability, uncertainty, and we can use that as a start to conversations. Another thing we can do is to create synergy in diversity. Think about the stereotypes of each generation. If we shift that mindset into how might I use this as a strength for my company or my team, that's where synergy will come in. And then last is to take a person-first approach. Very important to acknowledge that sometimes life stages are more important to look at instead of generational differences. Kung wari, di ba? Lahat ng generation pwede maging first-time parent. So yung life stage of being a first-time parent is something you have to acknowledge as important. We also said that we want to offer benefits and support widely so people can select what they need. And of course, we affirmed that having one-on-one conversations with each person is very important. Now more than ever, in the world that we live in, we really have to take these actions into account. The world is very uncertain and challenging. Hindi siya mukhang bridge kasi hindi ako marunong mag-visuals. But if you imagine, right, literally, we are all trying to navigate very unstable waters. Napaka-alon ng tubig, hindi natin alam. Minsan, ang gulo-gulo, hindi natin maintindihan all of the currents that's happening. And so, to help us get through these challenges, we need to harness the strength of all 5 generations that are coming together in this very unique time in our world. To summarize and to make sure that you are synthesizing your learnings, go ahead and type in the chat in one word or in one phrase. What concrete action will you take to apply your learnings from today? Think about something tangible that you will start to do. What would that be? In one word or one phrase, go ahead and share that in the chat, please. I'll give you a few seconds to type. Thank you, Liz. Yeah, talking with more people from other generations. I see M also said that. Oo, di ba? Minsan, simpleng conversation lang is something that can give you so much more insights. And for sure, we cannot leave off listening. Very important. I love the word that Krija Geneva K used. Internalizing. That's also very important. Scheduling one-on-ones with your workmates. Yes, I love that. When I was a new employee in my previous company, I told you, diba, I was the youngest one. What my manager said was, for the first month of the time that I'm there, all I need to do, like my biggest task was I had to go to lunch with every single person in the team. So kahit yung mga virtual, I had to find a way to have a meal with them virtually. It super paid off because I learned so much from having those one-on-ones. Research, be open-minded. Love, yeah. Sounds cheesy, but very true, right? It's really about loving and appreciating the generations. Observation is also very important as well. Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing those concrete actions. I hope that we can continue to practice all of these things. The interesting thing about the generations when it comes to diversity is hindi siya nawawala. Think about it, right? If you are young now, you're going to get old in the future. So lahat tayo na-experience natin itong mga stages na to in one way or another. We are going to get there. And so it's very important that no matter where we are in our lives now, we appreciate the variety of generations around us and what these different generations can offer. Thank you all so much for being so active in the chat and playing along with me as we discovered more about generations. And so if you enjoyed learning with me today, please do connect with me on our social media pages. Right now in the chat, I pasted our Facebook, our Instagram, and our LinkedIn. I'd love to connect with you over there. Later on tonight, I'm going to post some of the links that I used as I researched for today's webinar. So if you're interested to read up on the research I've mentioned, it might be good to check tonight. Usually 8 p.m. is when we post our posts online. And then something that I can also share is there's a free report that we created last year. It's called The Future of Work from the Future of Work. This was a year-long study that my firm created. We tried to look into what are the perceptions of the future from individuals 21 to 30 years old, and what can organizations do to start preparing so that we can make our organizations the kind of place where these people can thrive. That's all for free. The download link is right there in the link that I posted in the chat. And of course, like and follow our pages for more announcements on our next workshops and webinars. Thank you all so much again, and I greatly enjoyed learning with you today. I hope that with the lessons you got, you can start finding ways to bridge those generational gaps, because we are not that different after all, and there are more similarities than we may think. I'll turn you back over to Gabby.
Yes, thank you so much, Elijah. We learned a lot from that session. Grabe, no? Parang iba yung approach na we understand so that we can harness the strengths of each, coming from each generation. Kasi parang I think a lot of people come here this afternoon thinking na, oh, they're gonna prescribe something now we can do step by step in our organization so we can better manage each generation. But what they don't know is the tool is actually themselves, because they need to go out there and know who your teammates are, who the people are in your office, so that you can make an intervention that will suit the needs of the people they're working with. So thank you very much, Elijah. We really learned a lot from you, and I'm sure that our learners this afternoon have a lot of questions for you. So we're now opening the floor for our question and answer portion. We are going to use Pigeonhole for this afternoon. So I'm just going to share with you the link in our chat box, or you can go directly to pigeonhole.at and then just type in the passcode PW Bridge. Okay, so let me just share that with you. Okay. Chat box there. Okay, so now just go there. Do you love giving this topic? Like, do you love sharing or talking about this topic, Elijah, while we're waiting for them to answer?
Yeah, what's interesting is in terms of topics that I love doing, it's more of general diversity and inclusion. But what I find is, especially here in the Philippines, parang the entry to diversity and inclusion is generational differences. What I noticed is a lot of companies would usually request for a topic about generational differences. And then when you ask them, bakit po? Bakit yun yung gusto niyong topic? Dun lumalabas na the core of their request is they really want people to learn how to harness their differences. So I do use it as an entryway to the bigger conversation about D&I.
Oh, yeah. Oo nga, no? Parang we're starting to have conversations on D&I, and I think in the Philippines, as you said, we are starting with the multi-generational workforce.
Yeah.
So, yeah, now we have a question. So we can start with this. What are your thoughts in startups that only hire a certain generation? For example, millennials or Gen Z?
Right. So my honest answer and first reaction is, oh no. So I would say, for example, like in the US, discriminating on age is actually illegal. In the state of Michigan, for example, age is one of the factors that if you feel and you can prove that you were discriminated because you were too old for the job, you can sue your employer and win. So for me, I have a very quick reaction to that, oh no, that shouldn't happen. But let's dig into that question, right? If we think about startups, most startups are playing in unstable environments. Things change really fast. A lot of startups also have technology usage that they do. And so, siguro, doon ang gagaling yung stereotype or yung thought na startups, they want to hire younger people, usually your millennials and Gen Zs. What also happens is startups, the ones that are just starting off the ground, they usually cannot pay the salary of your Gen X or boomer or traditionalist people. Kasi if you think about the older generations, mas established na yung salaries nila. So sometimes nagiging function din siya na hindi talaga kaya i-pay ng startups yung salary of the older people. That's why they end up with the younger fresh grad, early in career, kasi yun yung kaya nilang bayaran. That said, my thoughts around that would be, if that's the reality of the startup, how can you find mentors, for example, from different generations so you can still get the wisdom and the years of experience from all of these older generations? There are so many incubators these days for startups where they provide that mentorship. So I would say seek that wisdom, seek that experience. And if you have a way na kung kaya ng budget, kaya ng reality of the startup, go ahead and try to diversify. Still hire those possibly higher level people already from older generations. So hopefully that helps give some nuance to my thoughts there.
Yeah, oo nga, kasi diba parang there are a lot of startups ngayon, and what they see is they hire the younger generation.
Yeah.
But yeah, parang coming from a startup, oo nga, hindi ko pa kaya mag-hold ng ganun laking commitment. So sometimes they take in the other generations as consultants, diba?
Yeah.
Parang on project basis. So yan. Yes. So I hope that also answered your question and opened your mind to parang the other side of the coin. So do you want to choose any of the questions,
Oh,
Christina?
okay. Let's see. So maybe let's go with the one with 3 votes, right? I assume that's because people were upvoting it.
Yes, yes.
Okay. How to create a vulnerable conversation? A very, very meaty question, but I would say the factor that's very important with vulnerable conversations is trust. Um, People will not open up to you if they don't feel like they have that trusting relationship with you. And so, if you have a desire to have that kind of level of vulnerability in your conversation, as early as possible, build a relationship with that person. Hindi kasi realistic, di ba, na you expect
Mm.
them to open up right off the bat about very hard things. And so, find the common ground first. Try to see, baka pareho kayo ng school from college. So, that's a commonality you can build off of. Try to find those commonalities. Number one, to build a relationship. Number two, frequency of connection is also something that helps build a relationship. So maybe have one-on-ones. If not one-on-ones, pwede ring informal coffee chats. If you're in person, quick chika in the pantry, diba? Like these are ways that you can build a frequency of connection. And then number three, one of the things that you have to do when you want a vulnerable conversation is to set expectations. And so after you've built that rapport, yes, after you've built that connection, tell the person, right? Hey, Gabby, as my colleague, I'd really love to get to know you more and have very open conversations with you. I have something I'd love to talk to you about. Can we set up a time in 2 days if you're free? There's just a touchy topic that I'd love to open up about. And so scheduling it is very important. And number four, I kind of already mentioned it. You go first. Kung gusto mo na may mag-open up sa'yo about a vulnerable topic, usually you doing it first to model it is one of the best ways to go.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Elijah. I think this next question, the one that received the most votes, is parang, okay, now I'm ready to have that vulnerable conversation, but I'm an introvert. Like, it's hard or it's a challenge for me to talk with other people. So, what advice can you give people like me as well?
Yeah, whoever gave that question, same. I always say I'd rather do a workshop with 500 people than do one-on-one conversation. Like I'm introverted in that sense that I find it hard to do one-on-one conversations. But that said, having these kinds of communicative exercises is very important in the workplace. So siguro one of the things you can do is try to reflect first on your own, right? Think about, okay, what's blocking me in terms of communication? Is it that I don't know what to say, or is it that I'm uncomfortable with the language used? So try to pinpoint talaga kung ano yung blocker mo that's specific to yourself. Because from there, you'll be able to know what you can work on, what you can try to develop. And then another thing you can do is you can observe first. So di ba mga introverts, tahimik naman tayo. And what I like to do is I observe the people that I want to talk to. I try to see ano ba yung style nila ng conversation. Ano ba yung na-enjoy nila when I see them in meetings or in talks with other people. And that allows me to kind of plan my approach before I talk to that person. And then number three, starting off with topics that are genuinely you. Before I had a manager, I talked to her about being awkward at small talk. Like I really hated networking situations. And diba in corporate America, if you can imagine, so many networking events, so many small talk things that you have to do. I would always tell my manager, di ko na kaya. I'm so bad at it. But what she said was, think about what do you notice immediately in the people that you see. For me, for example, I like it. Like I like seeing people with cute shoes or cute necklaces, and I'll tell them, "Oh my god, that's so cute." And so my manager was saying, "There you go. Like start with that because that's easy for you, diba? If you tell someone, "Oh my god, your shoes are so cute," they will most likely say, "Thank you so much," and start talking to you. And yun pa lang, nag-start na ako mag-conversation. So again, like don't put pressure on yourself to sound smart or sound like the others when they approach for conversation. Sound like yourself and see where that goes.
Yes. So I took note of those. I hope that our learners also took note of those tips and apply it as soon as possible so that you won't forget them. I think may three questions tayo dito na have similar themes. Na parang aside from the generation gap, how to overcome prominent cultural or values of different generations in a workplace. Kasi like, di ba, there are top management na yung top management yung hindi open for bridging the gap between their employees. So how can we navigate through those circumstances?
I would say maybe it depends on your specific context and your scope of influence in the company. If you have a position of influence where you can actually make decisions and make change happen in the company, I would say find data, show them the research on harnessing these differences so that other leaders around you could possibly get on the same page and also think about it. If you are not in that place of making that change happen, so let's say you're not a top level leader or you're an individual contributor, entry level, associate level, something you can do is, well, number one, you have to know your stuff. If you think this is important, read up on it, research, try to find a way to know more about the topic so you can confidently talk about it. Another thing you can do is if you find an opportunity, it might be good to partner up with siguro your HR, or if there's a person in your company who can do surveys, gather data from your own company as well. Data is very hard to refute, even for top leaders, di ba? So if meron kayong mga survey na pwede gawin, asking about it, asking about experiences of your employees, that's a really good way to go. Another thing you can do, find a sponsor in top leadership who can help you. When you do not have an influential position, you need to find someone who can take on that project with you and help you to push that with other leaders. So once you know your stuff, you have some data, try to find someone who you think will be receptive to the message and then help them to see the benefit in what you're proposing. Use them as a sponsor to get some projects and some small wins done para makita nung mga ibang leaders in the company the benefits of what you're trying to say and what you're trying to implement.
Yes, data talaga really helps as much as, di ba, I think a lot will listen to you if you have the data, the research, and the backup for it. So let me just read some chat messages. So dun sa kanina siguro na question, build rapport for first, use icebreakers. Tapos I think this was your third tip na sometimes it helps to strike conversations while doing another task. So it lessens the awkwardness.
Yes,
So, diba?
that's a really good one, Liz. I remember before we had a team building where we would cook our own dinner. So pag mga ganon, as an introvert, I'm like, whew, sigh of relief because it's not all just cooking.
Yeah. Napaisip tuloy ako, isa palang night, yan yung pwedeng engagement activity namin. Okay, so I think we can do two more. So I think we have a lot of learners now that are government employees. So how do we actually come to change the persisting work culture, especially in government offices, to give chance to Gen Y and Z employees who have the skills but not the age?
That's a huge question. So I think first is you have to get these people in the door. It- it's hard to shift the culture of the company. It's hard to shift the behaviors if they're not actually there. If theoretical lang sila, di ba? And so siguro one of the more practical things to start with is recruitment wise, are you even interviewing these people from the younger generations who you want to have in your company or in your government offices? Usually, the Gen Y and Z employees who have the skills but not the age, they are very savvy in researching the companies they want to apply for. And so lalo na yung mga government offices, what is the impression of your organization that you have out there in the world? Ano yung nakikita nila sa internet tungkol sa inyo? Ano yung mga kwento in news articles tungkol sa inyo? What do you have on your social media pages to signal the kind of culture you have? One of the first things I encourage you to do is to think about the culture that you want in the company. How are you translating that culture into stories that will be enticing for the new generation of workers who you want to invite to your company? The question is about changing the work culture, right? One of the best ways to do is to invite the kind of people with the behaviors you want and use that by creating a company where they can see themselves making change happen in that company and also enjoying the kind of culture you can offer. So again, internet is very important. They will stalk your company to death before even considering applying. So tingnan nyo kung ano yung mga makikita nila from a Gen Y and Z perspective.
Yes. Oo nga, no? Parang lahat tayo nag-shift na ngayon. We can easily search for a company's profile. What are they doing? So it's also important to fix those or to invest, diba, our efforts in really showing what our culture is so that we can draw those people in.
Yeah. And I think the great thing about culture is it's never one way, right? If you
Exactly.
if you encourage these stories and put them in your social media accounts, for example, it's not all just for show. Like on the back end, as you look for those stories from employees, it signals to the current people na, ay, importante pala na ganun ako, no? Like if you start praising a certain behavior, for example, and featuring that employee online, makikita nung iba na, maybe I should be more like that so I can be featured as well as an important employee. And so it's slow, yes, like what the comment in the chat says. It's very difficult and it's slow, lalo na pag bureaucratic and hierarchical.
Yeah.
But it's in little pushes like that where you start making those changes from an individual behavior perspective. So again, stories are very important. What you show out in the world is also a signal to the people inside of what behaviors matter.
Yes, thank you for that, Elijah. And yes, we also acknowledge, diba, na in the government, it's really different. Pero as what you said, it's really the small steps that we take that will, diba, eventually spark that movement as well. So we can take in one question pa. So pwede sigurong ito. Any advice? Kasi I think we have a number of students here as well. Advice for Gen Z or graduating students, particularly in today's competitive environment.
Get your resumes fixed. For one of the most tangible things you can do is make sure that your resumes are fixed and you utilize LinkedIn. Get your LinkedIn account fixed, put your impact statements on there. Don't just go with what you did. Show people the impact of what you did. How has it positively contributed to the team or the company that you're on? So that's one of the easiest things you can do on your own. Another is try to seek out internships, even mini side projects, especially in the world now that's virtual. There might be a lot of like virtual opportunity, even if it's just small projects that you can take on. These are things that could signal experience as well, even if it's not a full-time employment. So try to find those to help you gain experience. And then also utilize the current environment we have to your advantage. Right now, because everything is online, right? You can actually create your profiles online, make it as robust as possible, post samples of your work, create like articles to talk about that. Going back to LinkedIn, you can actually post samples there. Like it's not just a static resume. You can link to articles you've written, pictures of events you've put up, for example, org events in school that you've led. So all of these things, it's very important to tell stories of what you've done. So use what you have to your advantage. Kung ito na yung mundo natin na very online, use that to be able to show people what you can do and what you have done already.
Yes, thank you very much, Elijah. And ano lang, adding to tip number 2, I think, I'm not sure if ECC also accepts internships because Positive Workplaces does.
Mhm.
So follow our pages so you can keep in touch if we are offering our internships and make
Yeah,
use
so
of that
companies,
experience.
di ba? Companies
Yes.
like Positive Workplaces and our company, sometimes even the smaller companies, if there are internships, pros and cons, right? Like you can go with a big company with name recall, but also the small companies that are just like getting started. Usually, mas tutok ka, mas marami kang ginagawa na mahirap in a sense because you're given tasks that they actually need because it's a smaller team and a smaller company. So pwede yun. Yeah, just to really quickly touch on the comments in the chat. Yes, the government world is actually very different. You're right. I do have some clients in the government side of work. But what I find that works is it's acknowledging first from different levels of the organization that there's something that needs to change in the culture. I think if wala yung acknowledgement that change needs to happen, nahihirapan yung team to push for the changes that they want. So before I know it's so tempting to jump into all of these different strategies, right? Like getting younger generations, multi-generational hiring. Before you jump into that, I think one of the most impactful things you can do is to have like a conversation, a sit down conversation with the people in your team, the people who you think will matter in making decisions, so that you can really acknowledge this is what's going on. There's something we need to fix. And kapag hindi yun na-acknowledge, dun humihirap to make changes happen. So yeah, something to think about. But yes, I'm with you on that. It is very hard.
Yes, it is. Pero again, we are hopeful dahil hindi naman static yung whatever where we are now. So we hope for the best and do the best that we can. Thank you so much, Elijah, for sharing with us your expertise this afternoon. And we would like to present to you a certificate of appreciation. So let me just read the citation. This certificate is issued to Elijah Corpus for generously providing their time and expertise as a resource speaker for the webinar Bridging the Generational Gap, Engagement Strategies for a Multi-Generational Workforce, held on the 24th of May, 2022, signed by our Chief Enabling Officer and Chief Wellbeing Officer, John Baluyot and Nikki Vergas. Let's all give Elijah again a warm round of applause. So you can just click a reaction to clap, or you can send a reaction on the chat box. Thank you so much.
Yeah. They're very active in the chat, which is always great. And I love because some of them also shared their own tips, which I always love seeing as well.
Yes, thank you so much, Elijah. And we are receiving gratitude and a lot of applause in our chat. Yes. So if you enjoyed this webinar, we hope that you will join us again on Friday. It will be me and Alma talking about keeping up with the trends leading millennials and Gen Zs. So that will be on Friday, May 27 from 3 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. And that's what we are going to discuss. So we hope that you register. Don't forget to register because we are only accommodating up to 500 slots. And then next, so we just like to introduce to you the Positive Workplaces Academy. So if you want to book our consultant, coaches, trainers, and expert, or get a proposal from PW, you can just hit us up. I'm going to share the Google form that you can fill up so that Alma, our Wellbeing Services Associate, can get back to you. So also don't forget to like and share our Facebook. It's facebook.com positiveworkplaces.ph. And if you ever want to talk with us regarding our products and services, you can email us at learn@positiveworkplaces.org. And I think we are now going to the most awaited part of the webinar, which is the evaluation. So let me just share with you the link to our evaluation form. So again, don't forget to put in the correct email as well as the correct name, since we will be sending you your certificates right after filling up the form. So yes, thank you again, everyone. And remember, the form closes in 30 minutes. Thank you so much.